Welcome to Geopolitics Digest. Today is June 24th, 2024. In today's episode, we will cover the following: Alex Christoforo's news summary, the Duran's commentary on the terrorist attacks in Russia, Alex Mercurio's update on the war in Ukraine, and then Judge Napolitano's interviews with Alistair Crook, Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, and Kyle Anzalone, and then Scott Ritter. Then we'll move on to Dialogue Works interviews with Mark Sloboda, Ray McGovern, and Richard Wolff. We'll also talk about Danny Haifang's latest report on China, then Garland Nixon's interview with Radhika Desai, and we'll end it with Andrei Martyanov's take on the terrorist attacks in Crimea and Russia. What looms large in most of these interviews today is the terrorist attacks in Russia and Russia's response, which I can only anticipate will be at the top of people's conversations in the days and weeks ahead. Let's get started with Alex Christoforo's news update. Christoforo begins his report with a harrowing account of the attacks in Crimea, where cluster munitions deemed illegal under international law were deployed. These munitions, reportedly supplied by the United States, resulted in civilian casualties, including children enjoying a day at the beach. The emotional weight of this narrative is palpable as Christoforo paints a vivid picture of the innocent lives disrupted by the brutality of the conflict. The report emphasizes the role of U.S. surveillance in targeting the attacks, implicating Washington in the ensuing devastation. The Russian Ministry of Defense's statement assigns direct responsibility to American specialists based on their satellite intelligence data. This accusation escalates tensions between the involved nations, as Christoforo notes the potential for these events to spiral into further violence. In retaliation, the Russian military targets military facilities in Odessa, aiming to neutralize weapon warehouses. Christoforo speculates on the restrained nature of this response, suggesting that it may be a precursor to more significant actions. The silence of the Pentagon and the lack of coverage by Western media are underscored, hinting at a broader narrative of selective reporting and political agendas. The report also touches upon the social media commentary by U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who draws a parallel between the Crimea incident and a hypothetical attack on a Florida beach. Christoforo interprets this as an implicit acknowledgement of U.S. involvement in the surveillance and targeting process. Moving beyond Crimea, Christoforo reports on the terrorist attacks in Dagestan, which claimed the lives of security officials and civilians and clergy alike. The patriarch of Russia's call for preventing radicalization and extremism is highlighted, emphasizing the need for harmony among different religious communities and the need to resist retaliation. The report includes an interview with what Christoforo calls the android AI robot Budanov, who discusses the use of attack missiles in Crimea and forecasts a challenging month ahead for the Ukrainian front lines. Christoforo connects this to an upcoming NATO summit, suggesting that the significant developments may be on the horizon in an effort to impress sympathetic countries. Christoforo scrutinizes the European Union's decision to use profits from frozen Russian assets to fund military effort support for Ukraine. He questions the morality of such actions, labeling them as theft despite the EU's legal justification. Alex Christoforo's report for June 24th serves as a sobering examination of the moral dilemmas inherent in contemporary conflicts. Through his detailed account of the events in Crimea and Dagestan, he challenges the audience to consider the ethical implications of military strategies and the often unseen human cost of geopolitical machinations. As the world grapples with these issues, Christoforo's voice remains crucial conduit for understanding the nuanced realities of war and peace. Now let's go on to the Duran's reporting on the terrorist attacks in Crimea and in other parts of Russia. In the recent episode of the Duran, Alex Christoforo and Alexander Mercurius engaged in a profound discussion concerning terrorist attacks in Sevastopol, Crimea. The conversation delved into the complexities of the incident, the geopolitical ramifications, and the potential for escalation between global powers. The dialogue began with Christoforo outlining the tragic events where, according to reports, 5 missiles were launched, one of which deviated from its course, resulting in civilian casualties, including children. The Russian Ministry of Defense attributed the attacks to U.S. technology and assistance, suggesting a deliberate targeting of civilian areas rather than military installations. Mercurius highlighted the gravity of the situation, noting the Russian media's speculation that the main cathedral in Sevastopol might have been the intended target, which, if true, could explain the heightened Russian response. The conversation shifted to Russia's reaction, which was swift and severe. The summoning of the U.S. ambassador in Moscow and the subsequent Russian military strikes in Odessa were indicative of the seriousness with which Russia viewed the attack. Mercurius and Cristoforo discussed the Russian portrayal of the attack as an assault on civilian targets, implicating the United States in the process. The discourse underscored the dangerous precedent such an incident sets, with Russia threatening retaliation and the possibility of declaring a no-fly zone over the Black Sea, a move that could lead to significant escalation. A significant portion of the discussion revolved around the presence of American drones over the Black Sea. Cristoforo expressed confusion of Russia's restraint in not downing the drones, which have been operating with apparent impunity. Mercurius explained the delicate balance Russia maintains, avoiding actions that could be perceived as escalatory while also protecting its interests. The dialogue took a darker turn as the speakers contemplated the potential for escalation. They pondered the implications of Russia enforcing a no-fly zone and the likelihood of U.S. challenging such a move. The conversation highlighted the thin line between deterrence and provocation, with the risk of direct conflict between Russia and the U.S. looming large. Mercurius and Cristoforo discussed the concept of red lines and the distinction between attacks on Crimea and pre-2014 Russian territories. They explored the strategic and political considerations that constrain Russia's response, emphasizing the international support Russia seeks to maintain. The conversation concluded with a broader look at the global implications of the incident. The speakers speculated on Russia's potential response, including the distribution of missile technologies to proxies, which could further destabilize regions like the Middle East. They also considered the internal Russian perspective, predicting that while Russian society may currently rally around the government, prolonged conflict could strain this unity. The episode of the Duran featuring Cristoforo and Mercurius provided a nuanced analysis of a critical incident of the terrorist attacks in Crimea. Their conversation illuminated the intricate web of geopolitical tensions, the delicate balance of power, and the potential for escalation that could have far-reaching consequences. As the world watches with bated breath, the insights offered by the Duran serve as a sobering reminder of the fragility of international peace and security. Now let's talk about Alexander Mercurius's update. Mercurius reporting highlights the strategic significance of the town of Vodon, located near the crucial Ukrainian supply route from Konstantina and Vuhledar. Russian forces are systematically targeting these supply lines, aiming to encircle Ukrainian forces in a cauldron around Vuhledar. This tactic, if successful, would represent a critical shift in the conflict, particularly east of the Dnieper River, where the terrain favors defensive positions. The fall of this area would be a significant loss for Ukraine, potentially altering the course of the war. The potential for Ukrainian missile strikes on the Korean Bridge is a topic of grave concern. Such action would mark a considerable escalation in the conflict. Mercurio notes that while targeting a critical infrastructure piece, there is an inherent risk of civilian casualties, which could further inflame tensions and provoke a strong response from Russia. Mercurio reports on a series of terrorist attacks within Russia, some linked to ISIS and others potentially implicating Ukraine. One particular attack on the beach near Sevastopol, where a Ukrainian-launched missile scattered cluster munitions, resulted in numerous civilian injuries and deaths. These incidents are stirring ethnic and religious tensions within Russia and complicating the geopolitical landscape, or at least have the potential to do so. The broader implications of these events are profound. Mercurio suggests that the ongoing conflict and associated events could entrench permanent hostility between Russia and the West. The animosity makes diplomatic negotiations increasingly unlikely, and a Russian victory in Ukraine could have disastrous consequences for Western interests. 2024 has been the bloodiest year of the war so far, with the intensity of fighting increasing exponentially compared to previous years. The Russian forces continue their steady incremental advances while Ukrainian losses mount exponentially. The situation underscores the urgent need for negotiations to prevent further escalation and potential permanent hostility between Russia and the West. In summary, Mercurio's detailed reporting provides a comprehensive analysis of the war in Ukraine, highlighting the strategic maneuvers, acts of aggression, and the specter of terrorism that not only shape the immediate conflict but also have the potential to redefine international relations for years, if not decades, to come. The need for a diplomatic resolution is more pressing than ever, as the consequences of the conflict extend far beyond the borders of Ukraine. Now let's move on to Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom interviews, the first one of which is with Alistair Crook. In this insightful interview with Judge Napolitano, Alistair Crook delves into the complex geopolitical landscape shaped by the actions of President Putin. The discussion, set against the backdrop of the G7 meeting in Italy and escalating tensions in Ukraine, paints a picture of a world at the precipice of significant change. Crook begins by dissecting the G7 summit, suggesting that its focus was less about election optics and more a strategic move to bolster Ukraine with funds and weapons. This, he argues, signals an expectation of escalation, a sentiment echoed in Russian thought and articulated by Foreign Minister Lavrov. The summit's outcomes, including a security pact with Russia, spell out a clear message. The West anticipates and perhaps seeks an intensification of the conflict. The conversation shifts to what has been misinterpreted by many as a peace proposal from Putin, at least according to Crook. Crook clarifies that it is not a proposal for peace per se, but a final offer before an inevitable escalation. Putin's message is stark. Take this opportunity to de-escalate or face a more dangerous confrontation. The Russian leader's stance is firm. He is not interested in a frozen conflict or ceasefires that merely set the stage for further arming Ukraine. A poignant moment in the interview is the discussion of the missile attack on a beach near Sevastopol in Crimea. Crook and Napolitano highlight the human cost of geopolitical gamemanship with civilians caught in the crossfire. The Russian Ministry of Defense, typically restrained, pointedly accused American involvement, suggesting a deliberate act rather than a Ukrainian miscalculation. As the interview progresses, Crook outlines the Russian perspective on the escalation, noting targeted attacks on refineries and over-the-horizon radar systems. These actions seem designed to provoke a Russian counter-reaction, which aligns with Zelensky's desire to draw NATO, particularly the U.S., deeper into the conflict. Crook and Napolitano discussed the necessity of a new security architecture and agreement delineating the boundaries of the U.S. and Russian interests. Such a reset would address the root of the current tensions, the expansion of NATO and the West's refusal to acknowledge Russia as a potential partner. The interview touches on the need for a mental shift within the U.S. ruling elite. Crook suggests that the current crisis stems from an inability to move beyond Cold War thinking, which diminishes Russia's global role and potential as a collaborator. In conclusion, the interview between Judge Napolitano and Alistair Crook offers a sobering analysis of the current geopolitical climate. It underscores the urgency of dialogue and a re-evaluation of strategic interests to prevent further escalation. As the world watches with unfolding events, the need for comprehensive understanding of the stakes involved has never been greater. Now let's move on to Larry Johnson's interview. In this candid exchange between Larry Johnson and Judge Napolitano, the duo delved into the intricate web of geopolitical tensions surrounding the U.S. military's involvement in Ukraine. Central to their dialogue was the controversial Sevastopol beach incident, where a U.S.-enabled Ukrainian missile strike resulted in civilian casualties, including children. Johnson and Napolitano criticized the use of cluster bombs munitions, widely condemned by international law, emphasizing the moral bankruptcy of targeting non-combatants. The incident, they argued, not only sparked outrage in Russia, but also crossed a red line, escalating tensions to a perilous brink. The discussion also highlighted the alarming depletion of U.S. military arsenal, exacerbated by the prioritization of Ukraine over traditional allies. Johnson pointed out the unsustainable rate at which the U.S. is expending its munitions, particularly the Patriot missiles, with production lagging far behind consumption. This strategic miscalculation, according to Johnson, leaves the U.S. vulnerable and ill-prepared for potential conflicts closer to home. The interviewees expressed concern over the U.S.'s apparent and underestimation of Russia's capacity for retaliation. They underscored the explicit warnings from Russian officials, including President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, regarding the consequences of U.S. provocations. The U.S.'s involvement in programming the missile strikes, as Johnson and Napolitano noted, implicates it directly in the ensuing violence, potentially inviting reciprocal actions from Russia. Beyond the immediate conflict, the conversation touched upon the shifting global landscape. The U.S.'s aggressive foreign policy, characterized by sanctions and coercion, has alienated key international players like China and India. Johnson lamented the erosion of the U.S.-led world order, attributing it to a lack of foresight and an over-reliance on military might. The Johnson-Napolitano interview serves as a sobering reminder of the intricate balance of power in international politics. It calls for a reassessment of the U.S. strategic objectives and a more judicious use of its military resources. As the world watches the unfolding events, the need for diplomatic finesse and the commitment to peace becomes ever more pressing. Let's go over to the interview with Ray McGovern. At the heart of the interview lies the controversial use of cluster bombs on a Russian beach by the Ukrainian armed forces, a decision that has led to civilian casualties, including many children. Govern's bewilderment at such an action reflects a broader sentiment of incredulity and moral outrage. The deployment of these weapons, particularly the Army tactical missile systems known as ATACMS, with a range of 300 kilometers, suggests a level of aggression and disregard for human life that is difficult to reconcile with the principles of a civilized society. The conversation between Napolitano and McGovern is not merely an exchange of information, but a profound exploration of the ethical boundaries crossed in the name of national interest. The use of cluster munitions, banned by most countries, signifies a troubling departure from international norms and a willingness to employ any means necessary to achieve strategic objectives. This act, as McGovern points out, was not only facilitated but also possibly enabled by American intelligence, thereby implicating the U.S. in the tragedy that unfolded on the beach in Sevastopol. The interview does not shy away from political underpinnings of such actions. The suggestion that high-ranking U.S. officials like Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan operate within a paradigm that allows them to act with impunity is a scathing indictment of the current state of affairs. It is a paradigm where the ends justify the means and where the lives of non-combatants are secondary to geopolitical maneuvering. As the discussion unfolds, the focus shifts to the potential repercussions of the attack. The Russian response, as articulated by Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, is one of unequivocal condemnation and the promise of retaliation. This escalation of tensions serves as a stark reminder of the delicate balance that must be maintained to prevent a full-scale conflict. The interview illuminates the precariousness of this balance and the ease with which it can be disrupted by acts of aggression. Moreover, the interview touches upon the historical context that has led to the current situation, the legacy of past conflicts, the influence of foreign policy decisions, and the role of international actors are all woven into the narrative. McGovern's analysis extends beyond the immediate incident to consider the broader implications for global stability and the principles that govern international conduct. In conclusion, the Napolitano-McGovern interview is a powerful discourse on the responsibility of power. It challenges the audience to consider the moral dimensions of warfare and the consequences of actions taken on the global stage. As we reflect on the words exchanged in the interview, we are compelled to confront the harsh realities of a world where power too often trumps principle and where the innocent pay the highest price for the ambitions of the few. Now let's go over to the interview with Kyle Anzalone, who is a commentator and news editor at antiwar.com, a website dedicated to non-interventionism and opposed to warfare state. He is also the co-host of the Conflicts of Interest podcast. Anzalone is known for his in-depth knowledge of foreign policy and military conflicts, particularly those involving the United States. In this thought-provoking exchange, Judge Napolitano and Kyle Anzalone delved into the complexities of modern warfare, the legality of munitions, and the geopolitical consequences of military actions. Anzalone described the events that happened in Sevastopol as a real tragedy, emphasizing the civilian toll, including children, and the Russian government's stern response. He pointed out that the beach attack was near a military installation, suggesting a possible military target, but the reality of civilian presence made the attack particularly heinous. The discussion then shifted to the legality of cluster bombs, and Anzalone explained that while there is an international treaty banning such weapons, the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia are not signatories. However, he noted U.S. laws that prohibit munitions with high dud rates, which are unexploded ordnances posing long-term dangers to civilians, and Zeloni criticized the U.S. for ignoring these laws, citing a New York Times article that reported dud rates of the munitions sent to Ukraine were significantly higher than the legal threshold. Judge Napolitano questions the rationale behind sending cluster munitions to Ukraine, to which Anzalone responded that the U.S. had exhausted its supply of preferred artillery shells. He suggested that the U.S. opted to send cluster munitions as a workaround despite the legal and ethical implications. The conversation took a darker turn as they discussed the potential for escalation and direct conflict between the U.S. and Russia. Anzalone expressed concern over the Biden administration's shifting stance on military aid to Ukraine, which initially avoided provoking Russia but has since become more aggressive. He warned of the dangerous precedent this sets and the possibility of a nuclear conflict, referencing President Joe Biden's previous comments on the closeness to nuclear war in a conversation with donors. Anzalone and Judge Napolitano also touched on the situation in Syria, where U.S. forces have engaged with Russian mercenaries and other groups. They debated the Biden administration's objectives in Ukraine, with Anzalone criticizing the lack of clear goals and the unrealistic ambitions of Ukrainian leadership. The dialogue concluded with a grim overview of the situation in Gaza, where Israeli military actions have resulted in significant Palestinian casualties. Anzalone condemned the violence and the international community's slow response to holding Israel officials accountable. Throughout the conversation, Anzalone demonstrated his expertise in foreign policy, providing detailed insights into the legal, moral, and strategic dimensions of contemporary conflicts. His analysis underscores the dire consequences of military aggression and the importance of adhering to international law to prevent civilian suffering. All right. Lastly, let's go to the interview with Scott Ritter. This is not the last interview, just the last interview that Judge Napolitano gave today. The dialogue opens with a focus on President Putin's visit to North Korea and Vietnam. Ritter emphasizes that these trips marked a pivotal shift in Russia's foreign policy, signaling the end of its partnership with the West. Putin's articulated press conference in Vietnam is highlighted as a moment of clarity, where he openly criticizes the West's betrayal over the Ukraine conflict and declared a new strategic direction for Russia. A substantial portion of the conversation is dedicated to North Korea's realignment under Russia's strategic umbrella. Ritter points out the immediate benefits, such as the resolution of food shortages and the liberation of labor forces for industrial development. He laments the missed opportunities by the United States to integrate North Korea into a more global community, noting that Trump's efforts were undermined internally, leading to a strengthened North Korean nuclear deterrent aligned with Russia. The discussion on Vietnam underscores its significance as a rejection of Western advances. By welcoming Putin, Vietnam signaled its preference for alignment with Russia and, by extension, the BRICS nations. This move, according to Ritter, represents a broader trend of Asian nations pivoting away from the West toward new alliances that promise more equitable and beneficial partnerships. China's role in this geopolitical puzzle is portrayed as complex and somewhat reactive. Ritter argues that Putin's unilateral actions have forced China to adapt to a new reality where it must consider Russian interests more seriously, especially in light of the historical tensions with Vietnam. The essay takes a more sobering turn as it addresses the what the Russians perceive as an American attack on civilians in Sevastopol, Crimea. Ritter describes this as an act of war by the United States against Russia, raising the specter of direct military confrontation. He criticizes the U.S. government's silence on the matter and suggests that such actions could provoke a severe response from Russia. In conclusion, the conversation between Napolitano and Ritter offers a sobering analysis of the current state of international relations. It paints a picture of a world where old alliances are crumbling, new powers are rising, and the potential for conflict looms large. The interview underscores the importance of understanding these shifts and the need for more nuanced approach to global diplomacy. All right, those are all the interviews done today by Judge Napolitano. Mondays are a very busy day for him. Now let's move on to the 3 interviews conducted by Nima at Dialogue Works, the first one of which is with Mark Sloboda. In this interview, geopolitical analyst Mark Sloboda provided a comprehensive overview of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, shedding light on the intricate dynamics at play and the broader implications for global politics. Sloboda highlighted the increasing involvement of NATO and the European Union in the Ukrainian conflict, noting the potential for direct military intervention. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's statement regarding NATO's planning of a military mission in Ukraine, which Hungary refuses to participate in, underscores the seriousness of the situation. The conflict is expected to be protracted, with both sides enhancing their military industrial production to prepare for a long-term engagement. The West's actions in Ukraine are driven by an ideology of exceptionalism, which Sloboda argues is supremacist in nature. This ideology is leading to a dangerous escalation of the conflict, as the West views the situation as existential for maintaining its hegemony. This is a belief that There is a belief that a loss in Ukraine could trigger a domino effect, altering global power dynamics significantly. From Russia's perspective, further actions in Ukraine is deemed necessary to prevent the West from transforming any remaining Ukrainian territory into a platform for hostility against Russia. The conflict is not only about Ukraine, but is shaping up to be a defining event for the world order, with the potential to expand into a larger series of conflicts involving other global powers such as China and Iran. The interview also touched upon the chaotic nature of the current world order and the perilous phase humanity is entering due to advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons. The conflict in Ukraine serves as a stark reminder of the complexities and costs associated with modern warfare, as well as the risks of escalation to nuclear warfare. Sloboda suggests that Russia is prepared for a long and prolonged conflict, potentially lasting 5 to 10 years, and currently holds a superior position with advanced military technology and experience. Despite facing attrition and challenges, the Ukrainian military continues to fight, supported by the West, which aims to prolong the conflict and increase the cost for Russia. The possibility of the conflict resembling the frozen situation in Syria, where no clear victory is achieved, is a concern. There is skepticism about a quick resolution, and the West may eventually intervene directly, raising the stakes even higher. In conclusion, Mark Sloboda's interview provides a sobering perspective on the Ukraine conflict, emphasizing its complexity and the high stakes involved. The conflict is far from a definitive conclusion and has the potential to shape a new multipolar world order. It is a reminder of the need for careful diplomacy and the dangers of allowing ideological supremacy to dictate international relations. Now let's move on to Nima's interview with Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern began by addressing the preconditions set before the summit in Switzerland, highlighting Russia's intent to influence the summit and assert its position. He expressed concern over NATO's apparent pursuit of escalation, citing comments from leaders like Viktor Orban and the president of Serbia, who suggested that NATO's actions could lead to a world war. McGovern questioned NATO's belief that it could reverse the trajectory of what it perceives as a Russian victory in Ukraine. He found it troubling that NATO might consider the use of tactical nuclear weapons as a means to alter the course of the conflict. The political stakes, particularly for the U.S. during an election year, were noted as a factor that could influence decisions, with personal and political interests potentially overshadowing strategic considerations. The conversation touched on the personal and political factors influencing the U.S. stance, including allegations of bribery against President Biden's son and advisors like Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. McGovern suggests that these individuals might have committed crimes against the law, which could, after their judgment, in escalating the conflict. McGovern recounted the negotiations that took place between Ukraine and Russia, led by a close associate of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, David Arkhamian. He described how the agreement reached in Istanbul was close to being signed, but was ultimately derailed by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's intervention, who urged Ukraine to reject the agreement and to continue fighting. The suppression of this information by Western media was highlighted as a significant issue. McGovern argued that public knowledge of the near agreement and its potential to end the conflict could have saved countless lives and changed the perception of the war. The discussion also covered Putin's terms for ending the conflict, which included neutrality for Ukraine, withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from annexed territories, and a ceasefire. McGovern pointed out that while Putin's terms may seem inflexible, there is some room for negotiation, especially regarding the fates of cities like Odessa and Kiev. McGovern expressed concerns over the West's inability to acknowledge its losing position and the potential consequences of continued escalation. He feared that the use of nuclear weapons could be considered to prevent a definitive defeat in Ukraine before the U.S. elections. In conclusion, McGovern's conversation with Nima at Dialogue Works provided a sobering analysis of the Ukrainian conflict, the motivations of the involved parties, and the dire consequences of miscalculation. His perspective as a former intelligence analyst offered a unique lens through which to view the unfolding events, emphasizing the need for transparency, diplomacy, and a reevaluation of the strategies employed by NATO and its allies. McGovern's insights serve as a reminder of the complexities of international relations and the importance of considering the human cost of geopolitical conflicts. Now let's go on to Nima's interview with Richard Wolff. At the heart of their conversation lies the enduring Arab-Israeli or Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which has spanned many decades. Richard Wolff articulates the historical context, emphasizing the asymmetrical nature of the confrontations between the two communities. He points out the disproportionate casualties on the Palestinian side, a result of Israel's superior military capabilities and alliances with Western powers. Wolff, drawing from his extensive experience as a professor, expresses deep concern over the actions of certain universities in the United States. He criticizes the decision by some institutions to call in the police to suppress student demonstrations against U.S. foreign policy. This, he argues, is a direct result of the direct assault on the principles of academic freedom and the right to peaceful protest. The conversation shifts to a broader perspective, considering the international implications of the conflict. Wolff suggests that Israel's traditional allies, particularly the United States, are becoming increasingly isolated as global power dynamics shift. He warns that Israel's alignment with the waning Western influence could have significant consequences for its future security and diplomatic relations. Dima and Wolff discuss the media's portrayal of the conflict and the impact it has on public perception. Wolff criticizes the media's focus on universities that suppress demonstrations, which he believes creates a skewed image of the situation. He urges for a more balanced representation that acknowledges the diversity of opinions and actions within academic institutions. The most poignant aspect of their conversation is the human cost of the conflict. Wolff reflects on the loss of life and deep-seated hatred that has been fostered between Israelis and Palestinians. He laments the cycle of violence that seems to perpetuate itself with each new outbreak of hostilities. In conclusion, the dialogue between Nima and Richard Wolff serves as a call for introspection and change. Wolff advocates for an end to the violence and a reevaluation of the strategies employed by both sides. He underscores the importance of understanding the long-term repercussions of the conflict, not only for those directly involved, but for the global community at large. All right, that wraps up the interviews from Dialogue Works. Now let's go over to Danny Haifang's recent report on China-U.S. relations. In his most recent report, Danny Haifang offers a comprehensive analysis of the escalating tensions between China and the United States, particularly focusing on the developments surrounding Taiwan. Haifang's report is a critical examination of the United States foreign policy establishment and its wargaming scenarios that have now been met with stark reality, the potential conflict over Taiwan. Haifang begins by discussing the panic that has gripped the U.S. foreign policy circles following the inauguration speech of Taiwan's new leader, which hinted at Taiwan's independence, a status quo that does not officially exist. This event led China to accelerate its military preparations, signaling a clear message to the United States through military drills, particularly Joint Sword 2024, that any conflict over Taiwan would not end favorably for the U.S. The report delves into the Western media's portrayal of China's military capabilities, highlighting a significant NBC News report that Haifang scrutinizes for its framing of the situation. He argues that the media often misleads by portraying China as the aggressor, while in reality it is the U.S. that has been arming Taiwan and preparing for potential conflict. Haifang references predictions of geopolitical experts like Dmitry Alperovich, who suggested that China could seize Taiwan swiftly through a combination of air and sea assaults. The report emphasizes the importance of the One China principle, recognized by the United Nations and the United States, which acknowledges Taiwan's autonomy but not its independence. The essay further explores the economic implications of potential invasion, particularly the impact on the global technology supply chain. Taiwan's role as a major producer of semiconductors is highlighted, with Haiphong noting the potential economic disaster that could ensue if these factories were destroyed or captured. Haiphong asserts that China is not only prepared for a potential conflict, but is also advancing rapidly in other areas such as technology and healthcare. He cites China's involved innovations in electric vehicles and breakthroughs in diabetes treatment as examples of its progress. In conclusion, Haiphong's report paints a picture of a United States that is unable to compete with China's advancements and is resorting to provocations and preparation for war. He warns that the U.S. foreign policy establishment is aware of the disastrous consequences of conflict with China, yet continues to escalate tensions. Haiphong's reporting is a sobering reminder of the complex and often misrepresented dynamics between China and the USA. It calls for a critical examination of media narratives and a deeper understanding of the geopolitical strategies at play. The report serves as a crucial piece of analysis for anyone seeking to understand the current state of the and potential future of China-U.S. relations. All right, now let's talk about Garland Nixon's interview with Radhika Desai. This is somebody that I've never heard from, but it was a very interesting conversation. And obviously, this person, Radhika Desai, has a wealth of knowledge. Apparently, she's maybe a professor in UK. Anyway, this conversation between Garland Nixon and Dr. Radhika Desai, is a profound exploration of geopolitical dynamics, alliances, and the legacy of socialist policies in the context of contemporary conflicts. The dialogue delves into the intricacies of North Korean Russian alliance, the West's perception of Putin's ambitions, and the strategic interests that shape Russia's foreign policy. Garland opens the discussion by addressing the alliance between North Korea and Russia, framing it within the broader narrative of anti-imperialism. Dr. Desai responds by highlighting the significance of Putin's visit to Pyongyang and Hanoi, emphasizing Russia's growing proximity to socialist countries, particularly China. This alignment is not merely coincidental, but is rooted in a shared ideological stance against imperialist tendencies. The conversation shifts to the notion that Russia, under the pressure of international dynamics, finds it beneficial to revisit the Soviet Union's legacy. This includes the industrial prowess and diplomatic efforts to establish an anti-imperialist bloc in regions like Africa. Dr. Desai suggests that Russia's current trajectory is a strategic response to the challenges it faces, drawing from the Soviet Union's historical strengths. Dr. Desai further elaborates on the historical correlation between war and progressive socialistic policies. She cites the example of the United Kingdom, where the societal structure built post World War II is now under threat due to the abandonment of such policies by major political parties. The war necessitates economic mobilization, which is in turn fosters a climate conducive to socialist policies. The dialogue also touches upon the inevitability of certain geopolitical outcomes, such as Ukraine's reliance on Russia post-conflict. The U.S.-Israel relationship is scrutinized, with Israel being perceived as an integral part of the U.S. imperial structure. As the conversation concludes, Nixon and Desai discuss the U.S. political scene, upcoming elections, and the potential agendas for candidates like Trump. They express solidarity with Arundhati Roy, who faces legal challenges in India due to her criticism of the Modi government. In summary, the conversation between Garland, Nixon, and Radhika Desai is a rich tapestry of geopolitical analysis, historical context, and ideological discourse. It underscores the complexities of international relations and the enduring impact of socialist legacies on the global stage. The dialogue is a testament to the interconnectedness of domestic policies and international alliances, revealing the nuanced strategies nations employ in pursuit of their geopolitical objectives. Lastly, let's look at Andrei Martiano's most recent report, in which It provides a comprehensive analysis of the current geopolitical tensions and military conflicts with a particular focus on recent events in Russia and their implications. He discusses the nature of terrorism, the involvement of foreign services in terrorist attacks in Russia, and the broader context of these events within the global political landscape. Marchanov begins by defining terrorism as a weapon of choice for those without the capability to engage in conventional warfare. He cites recent terrorist attacks in Russia, including the tragic incident in Hokuru City, as examples of politically motivated violence aimed at making a statement. Martyanov asserts that these acts are often organized and financed from abroad, highlighting the involvement of extremist groups and the foreign intelligence agencies, particularly those from the West. The report delves into the specific attacks in Russia, such as the Sevastopol terrorist attacks and the involvement of Wahhabism, an extremist ideology banned in Russia. Martyanov recounts the deadly consequences of these attacks, including the loss of police officers and civilians. He emphasizes the establishment connection between the financing of these acts and foreign entities, suggesting a concerted effort to destabilize the region. Martyanov provides a detailed account of the attack in the Belbek airfield, a significant military installation. He describes the airfield's strategic importance and its proximity to civilians, underscoring the recklessness of targeting such sites. The report accuses the United States of orchestrating the attack, pointing to the use of American-made missiles and the direct involvement of U.S. personnel in the operation. A central theme of Martyanov's report is a perceived military weakness of the United States. He argues that the U.S. cannot engage in serious war and win, as evidenced by its reliance on terrorism and proxy warfare. Martyanov criticizes the U.S. for its inability to confront Russia directly, resorting instead to attacks on Russian civilians. The report touches on the strategic realities facing the West, particularly the United States. Martyanov discusses the potential arming of North Korea by Russians as a countermeasure to U.S. influence in South Korea. He also addresses the strategic nuclear balance, asserting that the Russian holds a technological advantage over the United States in terms of delivery systems for nuclear warheads. Martyanov criticizes the media and political analysts for their lack of understanding of military affairs. He calls out the echo chamber effect that distorts the public's perception of military strength and geopolitical dynamics. The report emphasizes the importance of recognizing the complexity of modern warfare and the need for expertise in assessing military capabilities. In conclusion, Martyanov's report paints a picture of a world where traditional military power is being challenged by unconventional attacks and where the balance of power is shifting. He warns of the dangers of underestimating the strategic capabilities of adversaries and the consequences for engaging in a war without clear understanding of the opponent's strengths. The report is a sobering reminder of the complexities of the current global order and the need for a nuanced approach to international relations and conflict resolution. Martyanov's analysis is a valuable contribution to the discourse of global security and strategic studies. His insights into the motivations behind terrorism, the role of foreign powers in regional conflicts, and the future of warfare offer a unique perspective on the challenges facing the world today. As tensions continue to rise on the global stage, Martyanov's report serves as a critical resource for policymakers, military strategists, and scholars alike. Well, that'll do it for today's update. Like I said, it was a very, very busy day, so that made this video a little bit longer than usual. But if you like this content, if you find it helpful, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, to hit that like button and share it with people. I would like to say that the reason behind creating this YouTube channel is a fewfold. One of which is just a way for me to synthesize and conceptualize all these different interviews that I hear throughout the day as I go on a walk or as I ride my bike. I'm constantly listening to this information, trying to stay informed and updated. So doing this helps me to synthesize this and to kind of make sense of all that I'm hearing. And so this benefits me. I feel like it benefits me, and I hope it could be something that could benefit you, especially if you're somebody that doesn't have 4 or 5 hours to listen to all of these interviews every day. And so this could be a way for you to get at least the 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 main points from these interviews, and hopefully, even if you've already listened to those interviews, you can come back to this sort of digest and go over the main points of it without having to listen again to the entire interview. But anyway, again, if you like it, I hope it's valuable to you. Drop me some comments in the comment section, just to kind of let me know that you're enjoying it or what you don't like about this. I can anticipate one criticism is that it is long and tedious, and maybe that my voice is not all that great, and I completely agree with that. But so if you have any ideas of how I can improve that, that would be greatly appreciated. But that's it for now. Until tomorrow, this is the Geopolitical Digest for today.